worthwhile, but you know, it's my own opinion, I suppose. And so we are live. So hey, it is Thursday night. This is the Weekly Shred. I am your host. I'm your tour guide, your leader, for better or worse, Jim Schultz. So thank you guys for being here with me for another Weekly Shred. I'm super pumped, man. I'm super excited. I look forward to these every single Thursday. Just trying to find the nuggets, man. Just trying to find the things that I believe wholeheartedly are going to help you guys get a little studio space down there in Shredsville, man. So let's do it. So why is execution so important? So hey, man, let me know down in the comments below. Like, I'd love to know wherever you're watching this. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Let me know. Do you think that execution is numero uno? Like, do you think that execution is number one when it comes to what you're trying to accomplish? I sure hope you do, because there is no other right answer. Like, very few things are black and white. Very few things are on or off. This is one of them. Like, I don't care what strategy you choose. I don't care if you do keto. I don't care if you do intermittent fasting. I don't care if you do the alkaline diet. God bless you. I don't care about any of that. If you don't execute, none of it matters, right? The most perfectly laid plans are completely worthless without execution. And so tonight, I want to talk about why execution is so important, but I want to talk about it specifically within the context of carb cycling. Because this is mission critical. This is mission critical on both sides. And by both sides, I mean the high days and the low days, right? So what we're basically going to do, for anyone that hasn't followed my content at all in the last 8 hours, we're going to talk a little bit about carb cycling. We're going to talk a little bit about, you know, my BFF in the world of nutrition and in the world of, you know, macro distribution. We're going to talk about carb cycling, make sure we all have a general idea, you know, what it means, and then we'll kind of get into, you know, why the execution element is so important. So let's do it, man. So Carb Cycling 101. Quick shout out to, you know, a little playlist I have there on the YouTube channel that is all about carb cycling. In fact, the first video is called Carb Cycling 101, and so you can check that out over there on the YouTube channel. If you happen to be watching this on the YouTube channel, then, you know, then check it out after this thing is over. So carb cycling is basically just rotating higher calorie days with lower calorie days. That's it. Let's pause right there just for a brief hot second. There's no magic here. It's not even mathematically complex. I mean, all you have to do is rotate some high calorie days, some low calorie days, where the variable or variables that you're moving, that you're toggling, are your carbohydrates and your fats. You don't normally change your protein from one day to the next. I suppose you could, but there isn't a really good reason to do so. But I suppose theoretically you could. What you're mostly concerned with, though, is your fuel sources, so the carbohydrates and the fats. And you have some high days, you have some low days. That is kind of contrasted with, you know, a diet where you just slug away, right, at the same modest 300 calorie deficit every single day, right? You're just kind of punching the clock, you're just kind of putting in the work, and, you know, that is the pathway that you've chosen to reach, you know, your physique goals. But with carb cycling or calorie cycling, you have some higher days, you have some lower days. You have some lower days that might end up getting pretty extreme, but then you have some higher days where it's like, hey, I'm back to maintenance. You're even above maintenance, right? You're really able to kind of enjoy that surplus. But one thing that's really important that we understand here, the cycle itself doesn't matter. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because this is probably its own shred, but how you choose to cycle actually makes no difference in terms of the fat loss that you are setting yourself up for in the end. There is no benefit to having higher high days. There's no benefit to having lower low days. Other than the fact that if you have lower low days, then you've set yourself up to have higher high days. But man, I would be very, very, very careful with that. Let me pause on that for just a second. We're going to be pausing a lot along the way tonight. You got to be really careful with those higher high days. You got to be really careful with those lower low days. Because this is something we've talked about before, right? It's this starve binge cycle. This is something that I know plagues so many people. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of disciplined people struggle with. A lot of experienced and seasoned people struggle with, right? You know, not to mention your beginners out there that might really struggle with this. I battled this mightily for basically the first half of my bodybuilding career. And it still creeps out once in a while if I don't keep my eye on it, right? Like, it's something that I really have to, you know, kind of keep under wraps. Like, if I just let it run wild, then I can very easily kind of flip back into sort of like a starve binge mode, especially when I'm in competition prep and I'm really trying to, you know, push the envelope. So for that reason alone, you might want to be careful with your high days becoming too high and your low days becoming too low, because then you really just start, you know, oscillating between the two ends of the spectrum, and I don't really think that that's super healthy. I don't really think that that's going to give you a healthy relationship with food, and so I would be really, really careful with that. But here's the reason why I love carb cycling, however you decide to slice it up. You always win. Now, what do I mean by you always win? Well, let's actually unpack that in the next couple of slides. So let's start with your low fuel days. So here you've got low fuel. You've got your low days, you've got your low carbs, you've got your low fats, right? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious. Let me know if you've carb cycled before. And just give me one word, the first one that pops into your mind to describe a low carb day for you. That's what I want to know. One word, right? Hangry, death, right? These would be very common choices. Some people love it. Some people joy, right? Some people are weird. They're like, I love low carb days. They're amazing, right? But what I'm going to actually do is I am going to kind of take that weird approach. I am going to kind of take that, oh my gosh, these are amazing type of approach. And here's the reason why. So you have a low carb day, right? Here's the first thing that I want to make sure that we all understand. On a low carb day, this is where you make your money, right? On a low carb day, this is where you really, really kind of push that deficit. Now, again, I'm not talking about super extreme stuff. I'm not talking about starve binge cycles. I'm just talking about the fact that, you know, if you did this without high-low carb cycling, whatever, you might be in a, you know, 300 to 400 calorie deficit on a daily basis, right? That's a pretty modest deficit. But when you start carb cycling, your low days are going to be, you know, 600, 700, 800, you know, 900 calorie deficits, right? Again, not super extreme, right? We're not doing anything that's, you know, dangerous or anything like that. But you're going to feel it, man. Like, you're absolutely going to feel it. And you start stringing some of those guys together to really push the envelope when you get near the end of a cut and you're like, man, I can see Shredsville in the distance, right? I can see the light on the hill. It's right out there. I'm so close, right? When you do these things, they're going to get hard. They're going to get really, really hard. But here's what's really cool. Number one, they're really effective, which is what I basically just said. But number two, your confidence, it's going to be sky high. Your confidence is going to get boosted up. You know, not like hitting a 1-rep max on squats. It's not like that, right? It's a lot more subtle than that. It's a lot more kind of background music than that, right? But it's still there, and it's still significant. And so now it's like, whoa, man, this is really cool. Like, you start building up this self-reliance. You start building up this self-confidence to where you're like, man, it doesn't matter what comes in front of me. Like, I'm going to be able to win. I'm going to be able to execute. I'm going to be able to do what it is I'm trying to do. Because I've just proven to myself that I can do an 80 carb day. I've just proven to myself that I can do a 125 carb day, right? For some people, 80 is low. For other people, 125 is low. For other people, 40 is low. For other people, you know, 185 is low. It all depends on your unique, you know, metabolism and your unique, you know, makeup. Shout out to the metabolism matching system that is inside of Full Throttle Fat Loss that all of our athletes have a chance to do, and it figures out your metabolism for you. So shameless plug right there. But either way, it's going to boost your confidence, man. Either way, you are going to come out of this thing, these low days, feeling like you can do anything. And that should not and cannot be discounted because it's so powerful. So you win with your low days. You win because they're effective, and you win because the confidence boost, right? So it's like, wow, I'm already winning, and I just had, you know, 35 carbs. All right, fair enough. But on the high fuel days, you also win, right? Now, this one's a little bit more obvious, but we still got to give the devil its due, right? High days, you know, you've got high carbs, high fats. So here, you get a nice mental break, right? So, you know, I mean, this is just how it is, right? You're dieting, right? It doesn't even matter if you're carb cycling or you're going with the modest deficit approach. It makes no difference. You're going through, you're battling it out. The days start to, pile up. The weeks start to pile up. And it just becomes a bit of a drag, right? It just becomes a bit of a grind, right? If not a lot of a grind. And so with these high days strategically placed, one here and there, two in a row, however you decide to do it, there are benefits to, one over the other that we'll touch on here in a second. But however you decide to do it, it's just a huge mental relief. You're like, wow, man, this is great. And it doesn't even have to be a lot. That's what's crazy. You can be humming along, right? Like take me, for example. Like a lot of times when I'm in competition prep, my average carb day ends up being around 125 to 145 in the beginning, right? And then at the end, it ends up getting a lot lower than that. But in the beginning, I can only tolerate about 125 to 145 carbs on my average. That's my medium day. So when I get a high day at 200 carbs, that's not a lot of carbs, people. Like let's make sure we all understand. We have a reference point. 200 carbs is not a lot. Like 200 carbs is a breakfast for some people, right? But man, when you're used to eating 130, you get 200, you're like, ooh boy, them extra 70 carbs, ooh, they're gonna find a home. They're gonna find a happy home, right? And so it doesn't have to be a lot, and you can feel a huge boost mentally in terms of how you feel, your mood and your energy, right? I mean, it's a huge mental break. And then there's actually some new research that shows that when you do things that are a little bit longer in nature, like a diet break where you're actually, maybe eating at maintenance for like a week or possibly longer, it might speed up your metabolism, right? There's some research that actually shows there are some physiological effects here that weren't there before or that we didn't know about before. And so it's like, man, these things that, these refeed days or diet breaks or reverse dieting, right? Whatever formal term you kind of want to give this idea, I'm just kind of sticking with the catch-all of high days. Whatever formal label you want to give this, it's effective, man. It's extremely effective. And more so than I'm even letting on these slides, right? I mean, we're talking about mental breaks, but I think that there's even a physiological component there. And then the other way that you win, I don't even really need to say this. I don't even really need to have this on the slide, but it's on there anyway. Food. Pancakes. Waffles. Maybe some muffins. Right? I mean, these are the kinds of things that you can have on your high days. These are the kinds of things that you actually should have on the high days. These are the kinds of things, another shameless plug for Full Throttle, that of course you can find linked to down in the description. If you hunt a little bit, it's not out there front and center. The athletes inside of Full Throttle, you guys have to eat bad foods around like week 7, week 8. Because I know that for anyone to have any chance at developing a sustainably healthy relationship with food, you need to be consistently weaving in these things that you have felt or maybe have felt. I don't want to necessarily speak for you, but that a lot of people feel are bad foods or evil foods, right? That you shouldn't be eating if you're really serious about your physique and really serious about fitness, like pizza, like brownies, like cookies, right? Like all that kind of stuff. Now, yes, these are typically, less nutritious than other options. So we can't do this all the time. But it's very important that you actually start to be intentional about doing this so that you can have a better relationship with food. So when you have these higher days, right, your favorite treats, that's where these should be placed. That's where these belong. And, that, again, is a really, really big boost. All right, so we kind of talked about what carb cycling is, but now what I want to do is I want to spend a few minutes on basically the goal for tonight. So it only took us about 13 minutes to get to the objective tonight. That's not too bad. In the history of, my broadcasting on air, whether it be F Cubed, whether it be Tasty Trade, whether it be when I used to be a professor, whatever the case may be, that's about average for me getting to the point, about 12 minutes. So the high cost of missing, hitting your mark on both high and low days, not only leads to faster progress, but missing the mark can hurt even more psychologically. Okay, now let me go ahead and let me elaborate on this point a little bit. When you go into a low day, when you have your mind, your schedule, right? When you have everything geared up for a low day, whether it's at the beginning of your cut or it's at the end, it doesn't really matter, but especially at the end when your low days get pretty low, right? When you're set up for a low day, you go into that low day. Most of the time, people don't have a problem with the first part of the day, right? Like breakfast, there aren't too many people that are falling off the wagon at 6 a.m., right? You just woke up, you're energized, or you're just waking up or whatever. You get to the gym or you don't, you start your work day, whatever the case may be. Normally, the wheels don't start to rattle till, afternoon, 2 o'clock, right? So the first part of the day, you're set, right? You're on point, you're ready to execute. You've got to keep in mind that requires a lot of mental energy, right? Like you only have so many mental reserves, and you are allocating these mental reserves towards this low day, right? Towards the execution of this low day. Again, this is where your money is made, right? This is where you really push the bounds on getting super lean, right? This is your one-way ticket to Shredsville. It's these low days if you decide to carb cycle. All right. If you go into that day, and then come time, the late afternoon, the evening, whatever, and you kind of blow it, you kind of botch it, like, is all hope lost? Of course not, right? And I don't care if you were supposed to eat 100 carbs and you ate 600 carbs. It doesn't make a difference. You can come back from that. You absolutely can. However, it can be really hard, man. It can be really hard. Not necessarily numerically, although it depends on how bad you blew it. That will determine that. But psychologically, it really can do a number on you. And I am speaking from firsthand experience, right? I'm not a robot. I mean, I'm the furthest thing from a robot, right? I've made so many mistakes in my career. It's laughable how many mistakes I've made in my career. When you go into a low day and you don't execute and you miss the mark badly, then psychologically, you come out of that thinking, man, I was ponied up. I was ready for this low day. And now all of a sudden, what do I have to do? I got to do it all over again tomorrow. Tomorrow was supposed to be a medium day, or tomorrow was supposed to be a high day, or whatever. Or tomorrow was supposed to be, my second of back-to-back low days. Now I got to reset the clock. Now it's got to be low day number 1, and I might have to have 3 in a row. Right? You kind of see how this works? You kind of see how it starts to spiral out of control away from you pretty quickly? And so this is why on the low days, you got to execute. On the high days, you got to execute too. But here it's a little bit different. Because again, you might be out there thinking, Jim, dude, you just lectured me on pancakes and waffles and muffins, bro. Like I got the high days under control. Like you might, but I'd be really careful. I'd watch out for 2 things. Number 1, your high days, if you're not careful, if you don't execute your plan, they can very, very, very easily turn into mega jackpot Powerball days, right? To where you went in, 300 carbs was your high day ticket, and you came out on the other side at 1,100 carbs. And that sounds crazy, but it's very easy to do, right? Very easy to do. You came in at 300 carbs and 75 fats, and you walked out 850 carbs and 150 fats. It's not hard to do, right? A fresh jar of Skippy, you can get it done in 15 minutes, max, right? So we need to be aware of this. And so number 1, you got to be careful that you don't turn the high days into mega high days. But then number 2, and this gets into a whole nother thing. A lot of times when you're working really hard at your physique, right? When you are just really, really getting after it, and it's just awesome, and you see things happening, and you see, the strategy and the protocols working, and all that kind of stuff, right? Sometimes, maybe more times than you might expect, you feel guilty on those high days. You feel like, man, I should have another low day, because I know they're so effective, right? I shouldn't have a high day. I don't deserve a high day. What am I doing? Right? Do I not want it badly enough? Like, what am I doing? I would make so much more progress if I just had another low day, or at least a medium day. But man, let me skip this high day, and let me just kind of, let me keep getting after it, because I'm in a nice rhythm and I can do it. You got to be really, really careful with that type of thinking, because again, I think that you start to breed this unhealthy relationship with food, and you also have to understand that your body needs those high days. right? Your body needs those high days for replenishment. Your mind needs those high days for replenishment. Your muscles need those high days for replenishment and recovery and repair and rejuvenation and energy for all the hard training that you're going to be doing, right? Because you've been watching the shred and you know how important it is to train hard when you're in a caloric deficit and you're trying to get super lean, because otherwise your muscles are going to go bye-bye, right? So we already know that. So when it comes to your high days, you got to execute. When it comes to your low days, you got to execute. Execution is the key. But when it comes to carb cycling, I feel like it's the lock and the key. It's more than just the key, because you're starting to move, right, to both extremes. You're starting to move onto either side of the middle just by the very nature of carb cycling, which I think is extremely effective. I think if you just slug away at a 350 calorie deficit every day, it can easily get very boring. It can easily just get really, really, really boring. And it's already hard enough, right? So you got to spice it up a little bit. You got to kind of jazz it up a little bit. And I think this is one way to do that. But man, execution just becomes mission critical. It really does when it comes to carb cycling. At the end of the day, for your action item today, we'll give you guys a little something here. So, your action item is give carb cycling a go, right? And take your daily targets seriously. I mean, the truth of the matter is, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here today. And of course, if you guys have any questions or anything, just drop them down in the comments. I'll make sure that I canvass all the platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And this is actually going to be up on the Live F Cubed website here pretty soon. Maybe in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we should be able to stream there on the website, which would be pretty cool. But take your daily targets seriously, but in the end, they don't really matter as much as your weekly targets. It's going to be your weekly targets that ultimately determine, your progress or lack thereof. Now, obviously, you're like, well, Jim, I mean, my daily targets go into my weekly targets. Well, of course they do. But in the end, especially if you're a little bit more seasoned, you start to realize kind of what matters and what doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter that much if you miss your targets a little bit, throughout the week, as long as you bring your weekly targets in line at the very end, right? But you just got to be careful, again, because the mental fatigue on missing a low day is very, very real. The guilt associated with missing a high day on either side, honestly, is very, very real. And so I would just be really, really careful and really cautious with both of those guys. So that's the weekly shred, man. There it is. I got some great ideas coming up for the next couple of weeks. I think what we're going to do, I don't know what order I'm going to do this in, but this might be next week. Let me know if you guys think this is a good idea or not. I think it's a decent idea, but I don't know. So when you diet down, or when you're dieting, right, you oftentimes feel very hungry, right? Like that is pretty common. Like most people feel that way. Well, why is that the case? There's actually a physiological reason behind why you feel that way. And it also helps to explain why at the end of a diet, when you hit your target weight, why sometimes, not that it's ever happened to me, sometimes you kind of eat out of control. Like for at least a meal, maybe a day, maybe a weekend, right? If you're not really, really careful, you're like, man, why am I just a bottomless pit? Like I just ate a huge meal, I should be full, but yet I still, feel kind of hungry. Or I'm not even really hungry, but my body is like sending me this signal that I need to keep eating. Why is that the case? Well, I'm not even going to pretend to know all the reasons why, but I think I've kind of figured out, one or two of them. So I think we're going to talk about that next week. And, after that, what's the other one that I had down? Oh yeah, the time lag. Ooh, that's going to be a good one. I'm not even going to preview that one. We'll just keep that one a little bit of a mystery. So, man, if you guys made it all the way to this part of the shred, that's amazing, right? Most people tune out after the first 90, 120 seconds. They're like, I don't know who this cat is. I'll give him a chance. And I'm gone. So if you're still here, that is amazing. So if you are still here, man, hey, check out the stuff down in the description for Facebook or YouTube, or up in my bio if you're on Twitter. Check out the podcast. Check out the YouTube channel. Grab the fat loss formula. It's totally free. Grab my cardio plan. It's totally free. Enroll in Full Throttle Fat Loss. Definitely not free, but well worth it in my opinion. And so check out all that stuff. And if you guys wanted to share this wherever you are, share, retweet, share, tag a friend, text a friend. That would really be awesome to kind of help get the message out there and maybe help some people, get closer and closer to their physique goals. So you guys are amazing. That's the weekly shred for May 21st, 2020. And